Welcome to episode 4 of the Retro Game Club podcast. My name is Hugh. This week we've got a lot of Atari and Sega news, and we're going to be talking about a cool assembler system. And with me is Rob.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we got a lot of news today, and a lot of it's already dated, so we'll try to walk through some of that. But yeah, how was everything on your end, Hugh?
Pretty good. I been playing a bunch of games. I wanted to do some programming, but unfortunately I've been suffering kind of a lack of motivation around programming lately. So I'll probably get back into it soon. I go through, I'm sure you go through this with hobby projects too, where there's kind of an ebb and flow, where you're really fired up about a project and you work on it every day for like 2 weeks. And then you get to some checkpoints, some point where you're happy to stop, and then you don't want to look at the code again for 2 weeks.
Yeah, especially if you're a programmer at work and you come home for a programming project.
Yeah.
You just need a break sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I tend to get more personal projects done when I'll call it a slow period at work, or a period at work where I'm not doing any hands-on stuff. You know, like if you're in a lot of meetings or, you know, release testing or something where you're not really hands-on, then suddenly the idea of writing code for 4 hours when you get home seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of games as well. Well, one, Super Mario Wii U Deluxe Ultimate Edition, Third Strike, however many names they put on the end of it. I keep saying that it just feels like a Mario game, and I don't like it, and then I just keep not putting down the controller because I'm having a great time. First time I've ever played it. So, pretty fun, actually. Have you played that one?
I have not, no. I because of one of the games we're going to be talking about later, I did pop in my Title Legends 2 collection, and I played a couple games off there, in addition to one we're going to talk about later. And man, there's a lot of, I don't know if you have any of these Title Legends collections, but it's it's like buying an album in the 90s, right? There's like 2 songs you want on it, and the rest is just kind of filler.
Yeah, and you'll just play it once and say, yep, I remember not liking that game back in the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's some real great games on here, but then there's also like Violence Fight. Which is just Pit Fighter, but I guess... You know what, I'm going to go ahead and say Violence Fight has better graphics than Pit Fighter. Alright, so let's get started. Like every other article this week has either Atari or Sega somewhere in the title, I think.
Yeah, and not a complaint. Well, Atari... Well, it should say one of the companies that owns the rights to Atari. So, yeah,
yes.
News article number 1. Atari republishes Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic after accidentally making it free. So, I guess on, I want to say Android, for a little bit, Roller Coaster Tycoon, which they put a lot of money, I guess, porting or recoding or whatever, to re-release, was free. So, they completely deleted the APK, which is the Android application, and relaunched it. So if you already downloaded it for free, you can still play your free version, but if you ever delete it, you're gonna have to buy it.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them.
Yeah. So yeah, they called it a technical issue, sort of like how MySpace had a technical issue where they deleted a bunch of data they didn't want to pay to host anymore.
And it took everyone a long time to even realize.
Yeah, I heard that it had been gone for like 3 months, and now people are noticing.
That's amazing.
I never had a MySpace page. But yeah, they apparently forgot to put a price on it when they originally published it. It's back up now for $5.99, which means it must have some extra. Maybe that's the full game. I don't know.
No, I've never played it, admittedly. It's just never... Like, I like SimCity and stuff like that, but Roller Coaster Tycoon, it didn't sound interesting to me, so I just never picked it up.
Yeah, so I played this when it was new. I mean, I got it fairly close to launch, probably, back when it was still probably $40. And I played a lot of it in the 90s, for sure, because I like games where you design amusement parks.
Mm-hmm.
I like theme park, and This is a little bit different than Theme Park because it is a little more focused on the coaster building. Not that it doesn't have other stuff to do, but it has, like Theme Park, you can build roller coasters, but it's relatively simple designs you can do. In Roller Coaster Tycoon is much more complex. But yeah, it's a really fun game. I mean, I enjoy them. I have, variants for different systems. Don't get to play it a lot because, like any of these Park Sim games, there's the whole, like, budget, and unless I have a cheat code where I can just have unlimited money, it's going to be pretty unlikely that I fire it up.
Yeah. How likely is it you'll spend $5.99 on it?
Not very high, but I would consider, for $5.99, if I had a Switch, I would probably give that a pretty hard look, because I don't really like playing games on the phone.
Same. I want a real tactile controller. Next news item. There's currently a Sega sale on Steam, which is pretty fun. You could get, the first Sonic for $1.24. Same with the second Sonic. Same with Sonic 3. Sonic 4, if you want that for some reason, it's, $2.50. But tons of Sega games on here, and it's still going on.
Yeah, and the thing that kind of interests me is the Dreamcast Collection. So you can buy the games in the Dreamcast Collection, and there's 6 of them. You can buy them individually for $1.19 a piece, or buy all of them for $4.49, which I don't know why you wouldn't just buy all of them.
And none of them, to me, none of them are garbage titles at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, Bass Fishing is the only thing I wouldn't play in this collection, and I don't consider it a garbage title. It's just not my style of game. But like Crazy Taxi, Nights into Dreams, Sonic Adventure, Jet Set Radio, Space Channel 5 are the other ones in the collection.
I think Jet Set Radio might be the best, in my opinion, the best Dreamcast game. I could play that game a few times a year and just have a blast with it. And for $1.20, that's awesome.
Of course, I do. That doesn't stop me from owning a physical copy of Bass Fishing.
Yeah, yeah.
Sega Dreamcast.
Do you have the controller for it?
I do. I found this was a yard sale find. So I have the controller, too. If I do another Shenmue playthrough, guess what I'm trying?
Yeah. That's funny.
So, another cool article here. Canceled Sega Genesis game would have had Alien vs. Predator playing football.
I read a lot of hate online about this idea, and if you ask me, gimme. I want to see these Alien vs. Predator on the gridiron. I am the least sportsy guy you'll ever meet, but you put aliens or space things in it, cool, yeah, awesome.
Wait, so who is the hate coming from? Is it coming from
the internet?
Alien vs. Predator fans or football fans? Like, which side is more opposed to this?
I think it's just trolls in general.
Just trolls in general.
I mean, isn't that what Reddit is?
I suppose, yeah. Yeah. Well, Reddit, occasionally I get links to stuff from Reddit that is, that are good, like people that link to stuff I've published. And yeah, of course, there's whole sections of Reddit dedicated completely to trolling. But so it's hard to say.
What do you think about this idea?
Oh, I like it. I like I like Mutant League Football. I like the Madden games where you can play as, like, monsters. Have you ever seen that? Some of the Madden games you can play as, like, a team of Frankensteins.
No, that's awesome.
So that stuff's all great. I'm all for novelty sports. I think there's plenty of room for it. I mean, I view this as not really being different than, like, Cyberball.
I was just thinking that as an example, and I forget if I just skimmed this article because I went straight to the comments, but I forget if they said why it was canceled.
With any of these games, you can pretty much count on it like someone came up with the idea in 1994. So it wasn't viable by the time they were going to release it, would be my guess. I don't know that for a fact. We get a lot of facts wrong. We're going to talk about some facts we got wrong later. So this is just a theory. My theory would be either the licensing was way more than they expected, or it just wasn't going to be done before the Saturn was coming out.
What I hope is they eventually come out with a movie about this, and I'm like a Friday Night Lights Alien versus Predator, and this game finally gets released with it. I'd be down for that.
It.
Yeah, I would be down for that.
Who are you casting as the head coach of the Predators team?
Oh, man, I think you got to go John Goodman, right?
All right. That's a good pick. Is Stacy Keach still alive? Or did he die?
I don't even know who that is. Which guy is that?
Yeah, he's a guy that sort of looks like a football coach.
You could even do Goldie Hawn and make it like a Wildcats thing.
Oh, I was going to get... Now I'm going to sound terrible. Were there any other actors who've played famous football coaches? I don't remember. I don't watch a lot of sports movies, unfortunately. So,
moving on here.
Moving on. Maybe Mike Singletary's looking for work. He'd be a good fit. All right.
So this next one, this is one that's already dated. It was, Google's about to release a streaming service, and the Switch controller is going to be compatible with it.
Yes. And then I guess this morning they also announced their own controller, which I saw this, and my first impression was this looks like a knockoff third-party Xbox controller. Yeah,
which, not an insult. That's just exactly what it looks like. But the streaming service looks cool to me. Like, if you're into streaming video games, and the one part that I thought stood out was you could be, you're streaming the game from them, so you're using their servers to play the video game, but you could also broadcast, so stream directly to YouTube as well. If someone's watching you on YouTube and they have a controller and it's like a multiplayer game or something, they could jump right in and play with you. Kind of a cool idea. I play video games usually, so I'm not playing with people. I'm more of a offline gamer.
Yeah, I'm looking at the final design for this Google controller, and I'll try and keep an open mind, because I know first time I saw a PlayStation controller, I thought, well, there's no way anyone is ever going to use that. Right? In looking at this, it does, again, look kind of knockoffy. But maybe it's really good. I mean, maybe it controls extremely well. Like, it's hard for me to believe Google would make something that just didn't work, or was unusable. I'm sure they have tested this controller pretty thoroughly.
And I don't think this system, for the most part, and listeners, please write in and let us know how wrong we are. I don't think this is really made for our demographic. I play mostly retro games. Within those retro games, once a month maybe I'll put in a new game, but I like to go back to the old stuff. And do you really need to stream Donkey Kong, or is the few K size ROM, small enough to just have?
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming the streaming is partially so that, games require more and more hardware now. So it's so you don't have to buy a lot of the hardware. Just, again, assuming you solve, like, the latency over the network kind of problems.
Which their controller is supposed to do. Their controller is Wi-Fi instead of any other kind of antenna, any other kind of radio. So I'm sure the system will be in our news in the future.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure I will end up owning one, despite everything I've said. That's usually the way this stuff works out for me.
Yeah, same here.
Over on the great site, unseen64.net, they just posted an article about a canceled PC Engine CD game called Missile Fighter, which looks like a crossover of Combat and Bomberman.
I want this. Mm-hmm. This is a fun, cool-looking game, and because it's for the CD system, right?
Yeah, CD.
So I'm sure it has Redbook audio sound. I'm assuming it does, or it would just be a HuCart. I want this in my life. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this looks like a lot of fun. And what they're describing here, it's like this sort of game where you're on a overhead board. I again likened it to Combat, but again with better graphics. And there's some barriers and obstacles on the screen. And it's a player versus player, offline multiplayer combat game. So I said like Bomberman just because the sprites look like Bomberman. I think it plays maybe more like Combat, really.
It looks a bit like Legend of Zelda too.
In style.
Yeah.
In terms of style. And they say it actually, if these screenshots are to be believed, it might be 4-player simultaneous. So you have to have the turbo tab, of course. And the characters have different abilities, so it's not just like tank versus tank. Like there's a little bit of strategy in terms of picking out what character you're going to use.
Did it say if this is downloadable anywhere?
It is not. No, they just have magazine coverage of it.
Oh, I want this. And I'm assuming it looks like it's 5-player or at least 4-player.
Yeah, it's 4-player. It looks like.
So I could use my turbo tap that is literally still shrink wrapped.
Unless you have a duo, then it's a different tab.
Which I do, and I have the converter. Still, never used it. What do we got next here? So, Hackaday.com, another great website, has an article about a 3D printed RetroPie case that utilizes the what's that top connector on the RetroPie? The pins coming out of the top.
The
GPIO, G something IO, General something.
You would feel like having connected stuff into that port multiple times, I would know the name.
GPIO headers. There we go. It's actually in the article. Yeah. So this looks like it's a case for your Raspberry Pi / RetroPie that looks like an NES, but with a digital clock on the front run by that GPIO slot. Kind of a cool idea, and it actually has outputs on the back, so you can actually play retro games and have a clock. Why not?
Yeah, you could put... Yeah, it looks like it's... I have the 7-inch Raspberry Pi touchscreen with a little stand, and it looks to be about the same size as that. So yeah, you could run full. You could run RetroPie or whatever on this. So it's a combination clock, alarm, and then I guess you could put other stuff on it at the same time.
Oh, I mean, you could probably play Doom on it.
Oh, you can definitely play Doom on it. Yeah, you can run Doom on Raspberry Pi just fine.
Oh, I meant on the clock.
Screen? Yeah. Yeah, because like I said, it looks to be about this. It looks close in size to the screen I have, and Doom looks fine on there. So
that's cool. Yeah, I'm into this. I just love people creating stuff. You know, the whole Thingiverse collective fascinates me. But all right, what else do we got?
More Sega news. Sega posted some new details about the upcoming Sonic show and Team Sonic Racing, which I guess is their Mario Kart knockoff?
Yes. I don't know much about this one. Admittedly, this is my least, I think, researched news item, but I didn't even know a new show was coming. I didn't know there was a new or re-release of this game. Sonic Team Racing will be released on Xbox One, PS4, and Switch, and the PC on May 21st, 2019. So, we'll talk about this later, but I think I love the idea of Sonic more than I actually like Sonic, so... I'll probably buy this and then not play it, or play it once. And
yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I buy a lot of Sonic games and I don't finish most of them, which is kind of weird because I do. It's like I enjoy them, but maybe not enough to get through some of the late bosses or late stages that are kind of annoying. But this isn't really a Sonic game. I mean, this is
the cartoon,
sort of a futuristic cartoon racing game. Yeah.
Well, and then the cartoon
Sonic
that goes
characters.
with it. So yeah, I'll watch it with my son. So cool. Yeah, I'm sure when that gets released, it'll be back in our show notes here. This next one is yours as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, Arcade Blogger. So if you're interested in we try and do a lot of articles about like projects and stuff, and this is not so much a how-to, but it's someone chronicling their project to rebuild a Atari Gravitar game. So Arcade Blogger has lots of articles about finding arcade games in abandoned warehouses or burned down pubs or whatever. And this is the last part in a series about the restoration of this particular cabinet. And it talks a little bit about the wiring and some of the things they had to do to make this work. And you can see, the tools and some of the steps he went through to do this restoration. So I found it kind of educational. Certainly, if you ever think about restoring an arcade cabinet, this will give you at least an idea of how difficult it is.
We will have a whole episode about restoring cabinets one day.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I also like what looks like an attic that he converted to an arcade. I'm guessing by the ceiling in his in the room that it's in.
Yeah. And so Atari Gravitar is a vector game from 1982. He actually converted it from a different cab, right? I mean, same cab dimensions and cut, but something a bit more easy to find. And
and this thing looks it looks completely brand new.
It looks amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have any thoughts, if you like restoring cabinets, or B, if you're thinking about ever doing it, please check out this article, because you will either understand the pains the guy went through or see pains that you might go through if you start doing this.
Yeah. The Atari alleged system has been delayed again, but this time because of a change in specs. Is that what I'm reading?
Yes. So on your old podcast, I wrote in when you guys talked about this when it was first announced, the Atari VCS, that I actually kickstarted it. I saw something pretty with the name Atari on it, and I just needed to own it. I know it's a stupid move. I understand this, but I couldn't help myself. And I understand that a lot of people probably don't want to talk about the Atari VCS because for many reasons. But yeah, so they were going with an AMD APU, which is an APU is a CPU with a GPU graphics card built into it. And AMD just released an updated version of their Ryzen 14 nanometer transistor APUs, and they decided to go with this. Their reasoning is it's faster, it'll be cooler, and also has a lot of integration already. So, where I'm trying to find where it said this in the article, but I think built-in Ethernet, native 4K resolution, yada yada yada, all this stuff. Oh, and better supported DRMs for videos for HBO Go and Netflix and stuff. And their reasoning is you're getting more for the same price because you already kickstarted it. And I am guessing that, it's nice that you're going to get a little bit more juice out of this. It'll make it a bit more competitive, but they're also not going to have to put in these third-party chips anymore. So there was a chip they were probably going to use for Ethernet. They don't need that anymore. And a few more things. So they might actually save money, make more money in the long run, profit more by doing this. Hey, I think it's a win-win. I hope this thing is cool. Please write to us. Let us know if you've kickstarted it or if you care at all.
Indiegogo did. Yeah.
Yeah. Vaporwared it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, maybe their strategy is not ever building anything and then every 12 months just saying, oh, we're delaying it because now this newer chip is the same price as the one we planned to use before.
I thought of that also. One bad thing also about this is it puts it closer to when probably the PlayStation 5 will be launched, which won't affect any of their sales because idiots like me already bought them.
Yeah, and no one for a minute thought this was a competitor to the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. They never framed it as a competitor to those systems.
No.
And you would have to be pretty delusional to think it's a competitor to those systems. I mean, I don't really like the Switch is kind of not a competitor to those systems, even though it outsells them, if that makes sense. Because
it's
you're not
about
going to
the
be
same CPU power. Yeah.
Right, because people who want to get the most powerful current-gen system are never going to think about the Switch. Now, they may buy the PlayStation 5 when it comes out, and also a Switch. Like, the Switch is more... I always thought the Switch is more of a replacement for the 3DS than it is meant to be a console. I know Nintendo doesn't officially say that, but I know at one point they said, like, oh, the DS isn't a replacement for the Game Boy Advance. That's crazy talk, people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I view this one.
Well, I figure I'll probably just bring this to my office, and 1 week after it launches, I'm sure RetroArch will be, ported to it, and it'll be my new retro machine. Because the controller looks pretty nice. In fact, it looks just like the controller Google came out with, so we shall see. Unfortunately, I'm sure the system will be in our show notes really forever, because it'll never come out. Possibly,
unless I decide to make it a band.
Yeah, you can veto. Yeah.
This breaking news from this morning. Also, Ocarina of Time is now playable in co-op. I mean, sort of.
So what do they mean by that?
So they call it online multiplayer. I think it. I didn't look at the specifics of the project. Like, I looked at the video and said, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." But there is a website called like Zelda Modders, and somehow I've never been aware of that site.
Yeah,
which
neither
is
have
crazy. And to be specific, it's HillionModding.com. And they released a video today of their work in progress multiplayer Ocarina of Time, where you have the Ocarina of Time game, game engine and world, but you have multiple links running around in it. So they were showing like a co-op run through the first dungeon.
Oh, I wonder if they're ever going to do this to Breath of the Wild.
Unlikely.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo will shut them down unless they're located in some country that ignores takedown letters from Nintendo.
Yeah. This is cool, though. This is a reminder that there are a lot of people so much smarter than me and has so much more time on their hands, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to see these projects. I also kind of wish maybe they were modernizing government systems or something also on the side. Maybe they also have day jobs where they modernize government systems. Who knows? But it's an amazing, amazing project, and I can't even begin to get my head around, thinking about how difficult this was to develop.
Yeah, definitely a passion project, and good for them. So cool.
Yeah. They also have a Twitch channel, so called Scroll 4 Initiative. Wait. Yep. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I guess you can follow progress there too.
Very cool. I mean, no one can test it out yet, right? Or can you play it?
They didn't mention anything about a download. If there was a download, there would definitely be a Nintendo takedown letter today.
Yeah. I would love to try it.
So that's my only fear with this, is like going after things that's Nintendo IP, you doing any work with them, you do kind of set yourself up for disappointment later.
Yeah. Next news item and last news item. I mentioned last episode that I bought that new M30 by 8BitDo, the Saturn-looking controller, and I can never pronounce this because I always just read it in my head, but Krikzz, Krikzz, did a lag test because there are two different models of this controller. There's the Bluetooth version, which I bought, and the 2.4 gigahertz version, which I should have bought, and they just do a lag test comparison. The version I bought has a lag of 21 milliseconds, and the 2.4 gigahertz version only has lag of 3.6 milliseconds.
And that's probably a lot when you're playing an action game, is my guess. Or a game that has very, very precise timings to get through a particular level. Like, if you're playing Phantasy Star 3, you're never going to notice a difference, right?
Well, so my test, anytime I set up a new retro system, which is quite often, I mean, I'm a host on a retro gaming podcast, so you would kind of hope so. My test is always Devil's Crush, because I have played that game for hundreds of hours, and I just know if it feels right. And it has to be quick, because that ball gets moving so fast. And because of that game, I almost always just plug in my controller's USB. So I couldn't even imagine 3.6 seconds or milliseconds, let alone 21, you know.
Yeah. Like, I can imagine it because, again, the things I play are mostly like adventure or RPG games. So the convenience of not having cables would probably be a good trade-off.
Yeah. So I may have to buy the 2.4 gigahertz version now.
Yeah, and when you're playing against somebody, you give them the slower one.
Oh, totally. That controller I have now is totally turned into a Player 2 controller. It's like a little brother controller now.
Yes, and they will wonder why they always lose.
But I do wonder if the other... Do you have any... You have some of the other... you have the SNES 8-bit-do controller, right?
No, I do not. I don't have any of their controllers, so I have a lot of odd controllers, but mostly what I use for the Super Nintendo is the ASCII fighter stick.
Really?
So I picked one of those new up for like $30 a long time ago. And that's mostly what I use is the ASCII fighter stick. I like that controller a lot. My original Super Nintendo controller is pretty well worn out. So I at some point I'll have to buy a replacement pad, but ASCII fighter stick actually works great. I also use that on the 3DO because I have a adapter to hook Super Nintendo controllers into the 3DO.
I can't even think about what the 3DO connector looks like.
It is it's not identical to the Genesis connector, but it's very, very close.
So it's like a D sub, like 9 or 15 pin D sub type thing.
Yeah, it's pretty I have to look at I don't know the exact pin count, but it doesn't matter because I have this thing hooked into it where I can then plug in a Super Nintendo controller.
Yeah.
So I don't even notice. But that's mostly what I use for Super Nintendo games. And then I have a boxed, new in box ASCII pad that's like my emergency controller for when my current Super Nintendo controller officially becomes completely unusable.
Do you have it's like a break this in case of emergency, and you pull out the new new controller?
Right, the new ASCII. Yeah, so I have the backup ASCII pad, and then I do this a lot though. Like when PlayStation 1 was being discontinued, there was a wireless PlayStation controller I liked a lot that worked really well. I didn't notice any lag. I'm mostly playing like RPGs on the PlayStation. So I made sure to go to GameStop and check the clearance bins and stash an extra controller because at that point I'd been into retro gaming long enough that I realized, oh wait, when controllers break, you are stuck usually getting bad third-party ones. This was before there were good third-party controller makers.
Yeah.
So I definitely have a pretty good stockpile of new or barely used controllers for most of my retro systems.
Yeah, I have boxes and boxes that my wife wonders why. Because I never open them, Mm-hmm. All right. Are you ready for the topic of this episode?
Absolutely, yes. We're going to talk about an assembler system called Vasm, Vasm. VASM. So it is a multi-target assembler, and it's something I came across a few years ago when I was trying to figure out how to compile Motorola 68000 code on Linux. What I didn't realize, I keep forgetting how young of an operating system Linux is, relatively speaking.
Yeah, it came out with the 3D. Well, he started developing it when the 386 came out.
Right. And the consequence of that is there are no assemblers for anything older than a 386 in Linux, generally speaking. They never considered... I saw at one point, when I was looking this up, I found some old email or paper from Linus Torvalds about, here's why I can't run this thing on 68,000.
Yeah, in fact, I think he wanted to start it sooner, but the 68,000, the 6502, it just wasn't up to the task.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So never happened. And so I can go back, I can grab an MSDN disk from the 1980s and get a Microsoft assembler. Microsoft never really built stuff for 68,000 either, because they were always, an IBM shop. But I can get compilers for old computers off Microsoft MSDN disks, that kind of stuff. But for 68,000, your options were kind of limited, and most of what I found was Windows software. So you at that point either have to run it in Wine or a virtual machine, or sometimes these were DOS programs. You could try them in DOSBox. DOSBox usually crashed trying to run some of these. So all the options were pretty bad. And then I discovered Vasm, which is written by looks like a professor in Germany. He specializes in compiler type of work, compiler theory, those sorts of things. And, wrote this sort of core system to do assembly in Linux. And then other people have contributed plugins to compile for different CPUs. So it has, all the different, as Motorola 68000 and all the different variants. It has Z80 and all the different variants for that. So you could compile a Sega Master System program on here. Mm-hmm. It says 6502 family. I haven't checked yet if that includes the TurboGrafx 16, which uses a 6502-like chip. It's like a 6502 variant.
I think that's what the family part is.
Yeah, it's hard to say, though. I would have to really try it. Being a 68,000 assembler, you could actually build a Jaguar game on it, but this also then has modules for the other chips in the Jaguar. So the Jaguar CPU was a Motorola 68000, which is why a lot of Genesis games got ported to the Jaguar without a lot of changes. So you could get a program to boot, but if you want to use any of the extra hardware on it, you can do that with this too. It can compile stuff for Raspberry Pi, if you need that as well.
Well, any ARM processor, which Raspberry Pi is ARM.
Yeah. It has, and then it supports a lot of different output formats. The module that I use to do Genesis development also can spit out an Amiga binary, so you can actually build stuff for both Genesis and Amiga at the same time on it. Now the code's not necessarily going to work because instructions you're sending to the Genesis VDP, obviously the Amiga is going to be hey, what's all this you're doing? So you'd have to have some conditional logic to handle the two variants. But
to go back, if you look at the last release notes from December 28th, they mentioned the Hue card, the 6502 in the Hudson Soft PC Engine. It's called Hudson Soft Hue C6280. So there you go. I
did not look at the last release notes. That is cool. Because I have a version that's stable and working, so I'm one of those people that once it's working, unless there's a security problem, I usually don't patch it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what kind of security problem could be introduced into a Genesis compiler.
But the reason why you wanted to bring this up was a lot of people have ideas to code their own retro games without using something like something modern like RGB creative. Mm-hmm. I can never pronounce that. And here you go. You can start coding and compiling your first Genesis game or your first TurboGrafx game.
Yeah,
which you're actually doing.
Yeah. I have a not particularly fun Genesis game that I've been building for a while. It's more, again, it's like I did a podcast, which at some point we can link to, where I talked a little bit about the motivation for this, and it's 100% like a personal education thing. Like, I'm not building a game that I think anybody would actually ever want to play. It's just sort of like a, hey, can I do this kind of project. That said, maybe someone will like it whenever I finish. I'm about 60 to 70% done. I just have to, it's one of those things where like the main game engine is pretty much completely done, and I just have to finish like the scripting part, which is, that's the part that takes me longer because it requires you to think about, how a story would flow.
And in any coding project, I'm sure really with every kind of hobby type project you could think of, the last 5% of everything seems to take as long as the entire 95 first percent.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even in commercial software, it seems to work that way. So yeah, I'm reading these the release notes here. New option -6280 to create Hudson Soft HUC6280. Yeah, that is pretty nice.
Now, your code wouldn't work on that because the 6502 is completely different than the 6800.
Completely different, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought because like the game I'm working on is set in the year 1989. I had sort of this crazy idea of like I'm gonna run it on like what were the newest systems of 1989. Genesis being fairly recently launched. But then as I look more into it, like the idea of, I mean, there's some parts that's reusable, but like the language is completely different, and very little ports cleanly from like 16-bit CPU to 8-bit CPU, right? It's just really, it's gonna be really, really hard. If I went the other direction, ironically, it probably would have been easier.
Huh.
But at the time, I really wasn't up for trying to figure out how to build for the TurboGrafx, because I've heard it's, I mean, there's some really great homebrew games out there, but I've also heard it's a little bit harder. I mean, again, like programming in Genesis is kind of not that different than programming in Amiga. And, Amiga's a pretty feature-rich system, whereas programming, the TurboGrafx is more like programming in NES, and not that that's not a great project. It's just harder.
Yep. Yeah. And this, I mean, you could, the Z80 also, I don't know if you mentioned that was in a lot of arcade boards. I'm trying to think of an actual system it was in. But yeah,
well, Z80 was Sega Master System.
Oh yeah,
just mentioned, and then might have been in the Texas Instruments computers, but I'm sure someone will tell me I was wrong. I mean, Sega Master System is the only one I will say 100% for sure. And also because like the Genesis has the Z80 built in, and I didn't know how to do Z80 development, but like the sound driver that I'm using is written for Z80 assembler, but they give you a compiled, like in their GitHub project they have, here's the Z80 source code. Oh, and by the way, here we already built it, so you just can load this in your code. Just load it like a binary file.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It was in the TRS-80.
So see, I wasn't talking about TRS-80. I was talking about the...
And it was in the ColecoVision as well.
Yeah, TRS-80 should have been obvious because it's got 80 in the name. The Texas Instruments computer that had a cartridge slot, the TI-99, right?
I don't see it here, but I'm looking at a really long paragraph with a lot of numbers in it, so I'm probably looking right past it.
See, the TI-99 used a Texas Instruments CPU. I guess that should have been obvious right there. Used some chip that Texas Instruments developed themselves. There, yeah. Again, that should have been a super obvious thing and required no thought.
Well, any other thoughts on Vasm?
No. I will say,
any tips for starting out? If you're gonna
discover
this hobby?
Well, again, if I recommend this again if you're doing it on Linux. That's my biggest thing is if you're on Windows, and we're probably gonna talk about some of these other projects later. Like there's things like Easy 68K on Windows, which is a sort of actively developed application with like a graphical user interface and debugging tools and those sorts of things, right? It's almost like an IDE to do 68,000 development, and like that might be a better route if you're on Windows, unless you like doing unless you want to run everything off command line.
Yeah. And please write us in, email at retrogameclub.net if you have any projects you're working on or have any interest in any of these topics or news items we've already gone over.
And I've talked to a few people kind of offline about some topics here and there, and if I've talked to you and I haven't gotten back to you for like a week or two, it's only because I'm flaky and really busy. But I was leading that to say, like, if you have a project or you're an expert on a project, you can email us too, and we, may be interested in having you on to talk about your project.
Yeah. We're, you and I have talked about some guests for the show. This podcast is the drama-free, we'll do whatever podcast. We're just having fun. Which brings us to the fun part of the podcast, Game Club.
Yeah. So I actually played a little bit of your game, although I only played through the first. I played through. We could go and start with your game, and I'll tell you my history.
Okay, yeah, my game was Bonk's Revenge. I picked this because Bonk's Adventure is just such a nostalgic game for me, and I never really got into Bonk's Revenge for no reason than I just had all these other games at the time. Not that I had like stacks and stacks of games, but something kept coming out where I thought, like, I'll get Bonk's Revenge another time. I'll get this other game instead for TurboGrafx 16. And I wanted to give it a run through, and I'm so glad I did. Before, I would always play through a few levels and then pick another game on my EverDrive or whatever I was playing this on. This time I played on my desktop. I actually emulated in RetroArch, and it played great. I want to give a shout out to the music in this game. The snow level, I forget what it's actually called, might be my second favorite song in all video games ever. Right behind, the infamous Mega Man songs. But I love this. I actually, right after our last podcast, I turned it on and I beat it right away. I barely beat it because I was running out of time, and I just had to brute force through the last stage.
That's like the boss rush, not to give away too many spoilers.
Exactly, yeah. It has kind of a Mega Man setup, actually, in terms of the last few levels. But if you haven't played a Bonks game and you're listening to this podcast, I'd be a bit surprised, but just in case, you're a little guy with a giant head, you're a caveman, and you're just bashing people with your head. If you hit that button really fast after you jump, you could spin around and kind of float around, and it's a really cool game mechanic. Exact same game mechanics as the first game, Bonk's Adventure, except they just updated the graphics, and it's really just a continuation.
Yeah, I at least on the Turbo graphics, I don't really. I get what you're saying about, like, it's the same game engine. It is the exact same mechanics. It's got your offense is headbutting items, and you can do the spin attack in the air to extend how long you're in the air and cross really long gaps and to get enemies. But like Bonk's Revenge is such a much better game than the original. Like the level design, like the levels are way more complex. There's hidden things all over the place on every level. More bonus stages, and this is why, like, I started it and realized, okay, I don't really have the time for this, because every stage has got one or two hidden bonus stages where you go to earn points to earn extra lives or extra heart containers.
And if you get enough of those, you could actually skip the next level, which is kind of funny.
If you know, some of these bonus stages are really hard. Mm-hmm. You know, things like, hey, there's a bunch of icy hills you have to jump between and not fall, and I can make it past like one.
Oh, I was like preternatural on those. It was the one where it's a bunch of skulls that are shaped like antenna. It's hard to describe, but if you go to YouTube and look at some gameplay, you'll know what I'm talking about. And you have to spin and hit every single one of them without falling, and I'd hit one and fall.
Yeah. Yes, I was maybe a little better at those. Some stages I was okay at, others I was pretty bad at. But you don't earn extra lives by, like, collecting fruit or items on the overworld. You earn it, well, I mean, kind of. Like, you collect the little smiley faces. But there's only so many of those on the overworld, and really doing these bonus stages is how you rack up extra lives.
And the bonus stages are hidden. You have to find the flower that pedals you away.
Yeah. So I just find it to be a much better game than the original. I think the enemy design is a little bit cool. Some of the enemies are the same, but like what the enemies are doing, like it always seems like in Bonks Revenge you're interrupting the enemies in the middle of them doing something else. Mm-hmm. Like they were kind of minding their own business, fishing or whatever, and now here's Bonk to get in their way.
Yeah. Some of them are even sleeping.
Yeah, and you can just take them right out while they're sleeping.
I felt like a jerk a few times. And what I meant by brute force for people who are listening and didn't play this game is that unlike, let's say, a Mario game, if you die, you don't start back anywhere. You start exactly where you died. Nothing changes. Everything in the world keeps going. You're just dead for a minute. You press the button and you're up and going again.
At that point.
Yeah.
Which again, because the boss fights, like the Mario boss fights, are typically like the boss takes 2 or 3 hits and they're dead, or you just have to cross the bridge. But on the Bonk games, the boss fights are kind of a grind. I mean, some of the bosses take a lot of hits to kill.
And I wanted to bring up that last week you started to talk about this, saying that Bonk might be one of the best mascot games ever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think of its generation. I think of that generation, you had a lot of great platforming games. And if you were just to take like the top platforming games from each 16-bit console, I mean, I don't think you have a choice other than Bonk's Revenge on the PC Engine. And you put it up next to Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Super Mario World, probably, right?
Yeah.
And I think it holds up extremely well against those games. If you said you have to play one of these games through right now, I would probably take Bonk over the other 2 games.
Well, especially with if you were buying the TurboGrafx CD or the Turbo Duo at the time, you got a CD that had Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge, what was it, Thunder Gate?
Gates of Thunder.
Gates of Thunder, yeah.
Gate of Thunder, sorry, there's only one gate.
Yeah. And so you get all those great games instead of just, Sonic 3 or whatever they were giving out at the time with Sega. Yeah, I agree. Like I said before, I was going to mention that I love the idea of Sonic. I have fun playing the games, but I think the Bonks 3 is not rated very well. I've never given it a chance. Mm-hmm. I'm sure someday it'll be a Game Club game, but the first 2 games I just think are better than Bonk, and in many ways as good as Mario.
Yeah, it's not as good as Mario 3, but it's again, I'm comparing it to like the 16, it's 16-bit peers. Just for fun, I did go and try other games also called Bonk's Revenge.
The Game Boy one?
There's a Game Boy one, which is a completely, it's Bonk, but it's not the same game at all. It's just an independent Bonk game. I have a physical copy of that because the Bonk games on Game Boy and Super Famicom are pretty cheap to import.
How is it good?
It's good for a Game Boy game, yeah.
Okay.
It's not as good as Super Mario Land.
Yeah.
Just in battle of Game Boy platformers, it's not nearly as good as the Super Mario Land games. But it's, kind of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles level good.
So, have you played Well, I think Bonk's Revenge came out for another Nintendo system. I forget if it was NES or SNES.
Right.
I know Bonk's Adventure did.
Yes, so
And it's
Bonk's
not
Adventure
great.
and a game also. Now the cartridge says Bonk 2. I think it might be called Bonk's Revenge. I would have to double check. Maybe I should have looked that up. This though is I'm holding a copy up right now of Bonk's Revenge for Super Famicom or Bonk 2. I'm gonna check on Moby Games right now, make sure I'm not completely making this up. Whatever the case is, this game is completely different from the TurboGrafx game. Completely 100% different game. So this is more like I guess I would say it's more like a Super Mario World ripoff game, because it starts off like in a tutorial level where you learn all the different abilities that Bonk can unlock by eating foods. If that makes sense. And then from that you you then go into a map that looks almost identical. I swear to you, it looks like the overworld map to Super Mario World. And you go around, you pick your level, and like even graphically, like the sprites and graphic style seem a little bit Mario World inspired.
Yeah, I'm looking at a video right now.
Yeah, so it's just called, I think Super Bonk 2 is the official name of it.
Yes.
It's not officially called Bonk's Revenge.
Super Genjin, and since Bonk was their mascot, it's a play on words like PC Engine, PC Genjin.
Yeah. So it's just a side note that I tried this version.
What did you think?
It is pretty cool, but it's another one where like I would have to sit down and dedicate some time to playing through it because it seems pretty big.
This is a beautiful looking game.
Yeah, it's very I think it makes really good use of the Super Nintendo color palette.
Yeah, and I could already see that the extra levels, the bonus rounds, are completely different.
Yeah, there's no similarities to Bonk's Revenge at all. I doubt it was even the same development team.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, speaking of development, I wanted to touch on the music again. The guy that did the music also composed the music to Friday the 13th Part 2 on NES, which apparently a lot of people like the end theme to that. I can't remember what it sounds like. I don't even know if I ever beat that game, but he's a pretty famous composer, and I can't find his name right now. But Google exists, so if anyone cares, please look him up.
Yeah, there's some overlap, and some people worked on both the Super Nintendo Bonk and the original Bonk games. There's not a ton of crossover, really. There's some, but not, I mean, it's definitely not the exact same development team.
Yeah, and I wonder if Konami owns the rights to this now, because didn't they buy all of Hudson Soft rights?
Yeah, which means you'll never see a re-release of this
That's
stuff.
so depressing.
You know, you won't get to see like the Super Nintendo Dungeon Explorer 2 or the TurboGrafx Dungeon Explorer 2, which are both, incredible games.
And we'll never get the Atari VCS port of them.
No, that will definitely never happen.
But I don't have much else to say about this game. I'm sure most listeners have played this one before even playing it for Game Club. Let's move on to your game.
Yeah, so I did Bust a Move, which of course has 1,000 different variants. It's also called Puzzle Bobble. Don't ask me why. I didn't look at the history of why the name was changed, and probably 'cause it kind of doesn't matter to me. But this was a game I first saw in the arcade way back in the 90s, and it was something where like there was a group of people who played Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and NBA Jam a lot. And then one day I kind of saw that group crowded around the Neo Geo cabinet and thought, oh, must be some new Neo Geo fighting game with lots of blood and punching people in the face, right? And no, they were playing Bust a Move or Puzzle Bobble. And it was every bit as competitive and fun as playing Mortal Kombat at that time. So I ended up picking up the Super Nintendo version like the day it was released because I was working in a game store at the time. And that's really the version I've played the most of all the Bust-A-Move variants. Because it's got everything that's in there. It's got, the single player, challenge mode, which is just like, so for people who haven't played Bust-A-Move, it's a bubble matching game. So at the top of the screen, you have some bubbles of different colors. And then you have your shooter, which shoots a random bubble. You have you can see your current bubble and the next one up, sort of like Tetris. And when you get three or more of the same color touching each other, they pop. And the idea is in single player mode to clear the board and in competitive mode to outlast your opponent. So every, 5 to 6 bubbles that you shoot, a new row from the top drops in. So there's always a challenge.
And the more you get at once, it'll send, if you're playing against someone or playing against the computer, it'll send bubbles over to their side and really screw them up.
Right. That's how you attack your opponent, because you can't fight them directly. You have to knock down more than 3 bubbles. In either every bubble that you break over 3 or drop down, because you can have a chain where I have 2 greens and below them are a bunch of other bubbles, and I break those 2 greens, and the others, they just don't float even though they're bubbles. And they drop down, and however many I drop down, those fly up from the bottom of the screen of my opponent. Now that changes at least in the Dreamcast version, and I'm sure other versions, sometimes bubbles fly from the bottom, sometimes from the top, depending on which character you're playing as. As the series evolves, they introduce new characters, and the characters have, different things that happen when they send bubbles over. But just the original one is perfectly fun. I mean, I like the later ones as well, too. I've played just about every variant of this that's ever been made.
It's on every system.
It's on every. There's some game called Bust-A-Move on every system. The most recent one I played, not counting the Super Nintendo one, just to prep, was the version Untitled Legends 2. The box calls it Puzzle Bobble 2, but the menu in the game calls it Bust-A-Move Returns.
What's this right on? Which one is this?
This is the PlayStation 2 Title Legends 2 collection. Okay. Which, I'll be blunt, not a good collection overall. Title Legends 1 is a much better collection. I think they were kind of digging deep for their second one.
So have you end screened any of these games?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've done so the Super Nintendo one, definitely the puzzle mode and the versus computer mode I've played all the way through. Late last year, I played through the Nintendo DS version. Mm-hmm. Space Bust-A-Move. Wait. Yeah, Space Bust-A-Move is the DS version. And then on the 3DS, there's one called Bust-A-Move Universe. I picked them both up for $5 on the Square Enix store Black Friday sale, because apparently they publish Bust-A-Move games now. I've gotten through puzzle mode in definitely the Dreamcast version, which is Bust-A-Move 4. Haven't played that one recently because I think this is one of the few Dreamcast games that doesn't work with the VGA adapter, which is really silly.
Yep, the other one is Bang-I-O, and that drives me insane.
Right, because there's not a lot of Dreamcast games I'd like to just fire up, to play for a few minutes, and that's one of them. And of course, my Dreamcast is hooked up to a VGA monitor.
Yeah, because it was one of the only systems that you could do that with, and it's so convenient.
And it looks awesome. Yes, it's so convenient. You have to hook it up and then hook up separate audio, and there's this extra box in the way. Super convenient. We should add that to the topic list at some point, because I'm sure people are curious about that. But anyhow, there's if you own a game system, Super Nintendo or later, you can get something called Bust-A-Move on it. And again, they're all kind of the same premise. Few little mechanical differences here and there. Different puzzles, maybe different versus modes. At the end of the day, it's all kind of the same thing. And if Moby Games is to be believed, there's 26 different Bust-A-Move variants out there.
I believe it. Just for the first game, the original Puzzle Bobble, obviously Taito developed it. Oh, it's not obvious if you didn't know that, but publishers, just for this first game, Taito, Panasonic, Sega for Game Gear, Interplay for Windows, Sunsoft for WonderSwan, And I mean, I see it on DOS here.
I have a
This
PSP
first one-
version. PSP version I don't like because the way that the screen displays on there, it's really hard to see. Like it's the PSP is a wide screen, but they do like an arcade screen view on it. So like you only are using, it feels like you're only using a third of the screen.
Huh.
So I don't know what
Yeah,
they were
I've-
thinking with that version.
I haven't played that one. But I, as I mentioned before, have a few arcade cabinets, Midlife Crisis or whatever that is. But a Neo Geo cab is one of them, and I have Bust a Move Again. I actually have the Neo Geo cartridge. So this was a great excuse to fire that up and play it, and I had a great time. I always get about 7 to 10 screens in before dying. And now I have unlimited, continues because, it's on free play for me. But I love Bust a Move Again. I think it has great music. I think that's on, correct me if I'm wrong, is that one Bust a Move 99 on N64?
It's N64, yeah. Yeah, because I have that one too.
Like exact same game. And so Bust a Move Again is the Neo Geo version. Bust a Move is really... A lot of people think of Neo Geo first before other systems when you bring up this series. Because that's what you saw in the arcade, I also played a Game Boy Advanced version. I forget the name. Like, maybe it was Super Bubble Bobble. Maybe it was like Bubble Bobble Advanced. Let's see. Google time.
And I think I gotta double check, but like Bust a Move 64 might have been Bust a Move. Wait a second. There's Bust a Move 99, and then there's Bust a Move 2, which I think some people might call Bust a Move 64.
Bust a Move 2 is the one I'm thinking of because that's Bust a Move Again also. Okay, yeah, that one. Obviously, it's the same.
Yeah, and this is a game like when I played the 2-player one, I played that with one of my kids too, and and any age can pick that game up and play it. It's not difficult to.
It walks you through the first level or two also. The Game Boy Advanced one was not bad. At first, I did not like it, but it threw in a lot of different puzzles that I hadn't seen before. Really small rooms that are really crowded. At first, I thought it was gimmicky, but I actually really got into it. And let me look up some prices here for that one, because you're not going to buy a Bust a Move Neo Geo cart. If you have a Neo Geo, you probably already own Bust a Move. But yeah, on eBay, you could get this cart for the Game Boy Advance for under $8 loose. And I would recommend that. And really, if you haven't played a Bust a Move game, I would say pick up any one of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and stuff like the PlayStation 2 version is going to be $1. Let's be blunt here, or $5 or less, really.
Yeah.
There's some because there's just so many different variants out there. So I was kind of looking because I have one, but not all of the PlayStation 2 versions. They all have terrible box art for some reason.
What do you think is your favorite version of this game?
I like the Super Nintendo version a lot, and I like Bust a Move 4 a lot.
Bust a Move 4 is a great one. Let's see, what was that on?
And that's not taking away from the other versions. Like,
Yeah.
the only ones like the PSP one, even though like I said I wasn't super into it, it still has 300 puzzle levels and is still fun.
Yeah. Game Boy Color for Bust a Move 4. I did not know that. Huh. And of course, this is on MAME as well.
Yeah, but go ahead and buy it. It's going to be cheap.
So, if you have played any of these games, please write us email at retrogameclub.net. We'd love to hear from you. And have you picked your new Game Club game?
Yes. I was looking over that Sega sale. Made me realize how much I enjoy Crazy Taxi. So I'm going to go with Crazy Taxi next.
I love that game. I'm so happy you picked that one. As usual, it's so hard not to just start talking about them, so I will bite my tongue and just wait for the next episode. I picked Gauntlet, either 1 or 2, the old school games. Heck, even play Gauntlet Legends. I don't care. The reason is that I just haven't played it in a while, looking for an excuse to. And I have to admit something to everyone. I'm waiting for we have already a really good listener base. I'm waiting for it to expand a little bit more. That I'm just holding some games that I hold dear to my heart that I haven't played in a while to share with a few more listeners. So that's why I'm kind of going to, I guess people could say like some easy picks, you know?
Yeah. So in other words, you're telling people they should all tell a friend about the show. So if they want to
Spam
hear
everyone
about
you know.
games.
Spam your mom. Spam your workmates.
If you have if you're on the social media, share it there. If I hate to keep sounding like I'm on a high horse. I deleted all my social media like last year. But if you're interested in helping us with social media, by the way, I would not complain. You have to not be a psychopath. Mm-hmm. That's the real requirement, But if you like tweeting about podcasts and retro games, and you're not a psychopath, shoot us an email too. And,
please, yeah. We both know how to social media, but both of us, our lives are a bit crazy right now, and recording this podcast and actually playing the Game Club games is really all of our bandwidth.
Yeah, that's
And we promise we're not psychopaths either.
Yeah, I mean, I won't completely promise that, but yeah, for me, it was, at least with Twitter, it was a matter of like not having good impulse control, and like there's always it's like a gambling system, it's sort of built to like reward you for checking it often, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I found that I was spending too much time just checking Twitter status, and it was cutting into time that I wanted to do other things with. So I said, well, if I can't get myself to say I'm only going to check once a day, I'm just going to delete my account. And then, I've won. I can ignore self-control a little bit longer, but I can also just not deal with it at all, which
exactly
has been fine. So that's, for me, it wasn't like, it was more like a time. It was just eating up time that I wanted to do productive things with. Now that we've done such a great job selling you on Twitter.
Exactly.
If you enjoy, if this is something you like and is not destroying your productive time, shoot us an email at retrogameclub.net.
Feel free to write us about anything. We'll never, I don't think, create a Patreon. We're not going to ever make money off this. We're just doing this because we love talking about retro games, and it gives us an excuse to, and we hope you love listening about retro games and playing our game club picked games of the episodes. And
we have some feedback on some of our previous picks, and even this one of this week's picks too. Yes.
You want to start off with Brandon's?
Yeah, Brandon, who I've talked to a couple times. Let's see, he's a longtime listener of my old podcast. Really enjoys this one, which we appreciate. And he wanted to talk about Golden Axe. And this is a great story. He says he remembers going to his childhood dentist and playing a few different arcade games there, mostly to take his mind off the impending checkup because he thought his dentist was evil. So the dentist had a tabletop version of Pac-Man and Mr. Do, which is that's
a cool
pretty
dentist,
awesome already.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you were called back to get your teeth cleaned, sometimes you had to wait for a few minutes. So they had Golden Axe on a Sega Genesis hooked up for you. And he said he could usually beat the first level before the dentist got there for the cleaning. Or I guess it would probably be the hygienist. So that is very cool. When my kids were young, I I took them to like a kid's dentist, a dentist that just specializes in kids, and they had a Nintendo 64 in their waiting room. But this is way cooler. I would take tabletop. I like Nintendo 64, but in terms of like waiting room, tabletop Pac-Man in Mr. Do is way beyond. Like that's a perfect waiting room game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would probably, after my checkup, I would probably just hang out and try to play those if possible.
Yes. I did play through Super Metroid the weekend after I got my wisdom teeth removed. Because I did not want to get out of bed.
Yeah, I do not blame you. So, Brandon, thanks for that email. We got one from Jess saying hi and letting me know that the Tetris pieces are tetraminos or tetraminos, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I think I knew that, kind of. Every time we start our episodes, one of us says, okay, I'm recording, and then both of us forget really English in general, common knowledge on things. So
I did not know tetramy. I think if you shot me up with truth serum, I could not get tetraminos.
I think it's because I watched that Tetris documentary, and that's how it was stored in my brain somewhere, but I would never be able to pull it out of thin air. Bust a Move. He's already writing us about these games. It's great.
Oh, but as he mentioned, one of the many mistakes we made, which is the Game Boy version of Tetris does support the link cable, and it does have a system where multiple lines, when you break a bunch of lines, it moves your opponent's blocks up one.
And that makes sense because it was the game for the system, so why not use the cable?
Yeah. I have absolutely no recollection of that.
Same, yeah. Pretty cool, though. Do you think they'll ever make like a Bluetooth wireless? Oh, they've got to already do this. Cables, I'm using air quote, for the original Game Boy.
I don't know, but I'm Googling it while you finish the email.
If not, patent pending. Yeah. We'll create it. While you're Googling that, Bust Move, he first saw it in his college's student center in about 96, so he's about our age. And found the name amusing, the hip-hop theme, meaning dancing, to play on words, and it's from Bubble Bobble. And he's just now playing the NES port on the Hyena emulator, same one I use, it is the best one. And got to stage 30 on 7 Continues, which is actually not too bad, if you ask me. He does say it seems a bit easier than the arcade version. That's probably true because, those want to eat your quarters. And the difficulty seemed a bit inconsistent, and I know what you mean there as well. Mm-hmm. He doesn't remember the music of the arcade version, but the SNES version was a bit repetitive. The arcade version is repetitive also, but it's, if you ask me, really good music. And Jess, thank you very much for that email.
Yeah. Looks like no one has come up with the Game Boy Link Bluetooth thing yet.
Patent pending. Yeah. It'll be one of the 1,000 projects I start and never complete.
Game Boy Advance, it looks like, at a very cursory glance, people have spent some time looking at that.
It's probably because it would have to run off the batteries and it would just drain the batteries even faster or something.
Yeah, you would have to... Yeah, the power's going to be the biggest problem, I think. More than anything else.
8-Bit Doe's got to get all over this. I want my Game Boy 30 Pro.
Yeah, good luck. So, again, email at retrogameclub.net. And you can write about our upcoming games, which, again, are Gauntlet, which you're going to have a hard time because I have some weird thing where I can't pronounce the word Gauntlet correctly. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I've never gotten that game title right. And Crazy Taxi. And any version of those are fine. Like Gauntlet, the game I can't pronounce, I probably played the NES version more than any other version.
Same. And Legends or Dark... What is it? Legacy and Dark Legends, right? Or am I getting that backwards?
Yeah.
Dark Legacy Legends.
Wait.
I don't know. Whatever.
Whatever. And like most respectable gamers, I have played Crazy Taxi on Dreamcast more than any other system.
And email us at email@retrogameclub.net, and please give us some stars on iTunes or wherever you listen to us. It's an easy way to help us out.
Yes, I know we're also on the Google Play, although I had to, it was like, I don't know what's wrong. Like Google's a search engine, like searching the title did not show up on Google, but you could find the show by browsing. Hopefully that gets fixed. I'm assuming there's supposed to be an index that takes some number of days for them to update.
I found the same thing. Yeah. Well, all right. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.